Could the federal government shut down in 2025? We just saw the House pass a massive budget resolution to kickstart Trump's big agenda. We have some drama, and we have a big $4.5 trillion question hanging over all of it. Let's break it down. Okay, February 25th, Speaker Mike Johnson pulled off a miracle in the House. He got this huge budget resolution passed, and it wasn't pretty. You had hardline conservatives ready to tank it. The moderates were sweating, and at the last second, Johnson's able to flip 3 rebels to clinch the win. The final score? 217 to 215. That's razor thin, kind of like Pete Hegseth's confirmation hearing. But this is just the start. Here's what Chip Roy from Texas said right after. We took one necessary step, but there are many miles to go. Sounds like a motivational poster, but he's not wrong. This resolution is key to unlocking something called reconciliation. That's a fancy term for we're bypassing the Senate's filibuster. And this is what the Trump supporters have been waiting for. They don't want to have to rely on a supermajority in the Senate because they don't have it. They don't have a supermajority. So they're saying, hey, we'll do reconciliation. That way, we can just have a simple majority. We can just cram Trump's plan down everyone's throat and they have to take it. But Johnson's not out of the woods just yet. The House did pass their one big, beautiful bill. That's Trump's words. Those aren't my words. They did pass that, but the Senate, they have their own plan, and now he has to wrestle around with the Senate. Last week, the Senate approved a 2-track plan, 2 smaller bills instead of one mega package. One for border security and energy, and another one for taxes. The problem is, for this trick of reconciliation to work, both chambers in Congress, they need to be in line when it comes to the resolution. Now, taxes are the point of contention. The House caps the deficit hit to extending the Trump 2017 tax cuts to $4.5 trillion. Why? It's because hardline Republicans, they want a deficit neutral bill if they can have it. They can't have it. They don't want to add any more to the $34 trillion that we're already in. That's our national debt. But the CBO says that making those tax cuts permanent, it'll be $4.7 trillion over the next 10 years. The wild thing about this is all throughout the campaign trail, when it comes to Donald Trump, you've heard talk about the government spending too much money. We got to bring the deficit down. By any means necessary, we got to bring it down. We need one big, beautiful bill. We're going to bring it down. They're not bringing it down. If you look at it, $4.5 trillion, and what's the spending cuts being proposed here? It's $2 trillion or $1.5 trillion. So you're still in the red. No matter which way you cut it, no matter how you do the math, you're in the red. That $4.7 trillion price tag, that's not some made up number. That's not a shot in the dark. The CBO calculated it. That's what it's going to take if you want to keep the tax rate at 37%. So the top tax rate in the country right now is 37%. It used to be 39.6. So the Trump tax cuts actually lowered it. Same thing with standard deduction. He doubled the standard deduction. Now, maybe this was to encourage people to not itemize their taxes, so they end up paying more. But whatever the case is, he doubled the standard deduction. That helped probably over 80% of the people in this country. And, having lower taxes is a wonderful thing. It's a great thing. I can see why so many people are in support of it, but it comes with a cost. So last week, everyone came together. They had a nice, happy meeting at the White House. And Johnson said that there was lots of progress. There was close unity between the House and the Senate. Optimistic? Sure. Realistic? Probably not. Any changes that happen in the Senate, you're going to take that thing and bring it right back into the House, and the whole circus show starts all over again. But then there's the ticking time bomb called Medicaid. The House resolution tells the Energy and Commerce Committee to find $880 billion in cuts. Yep, that's billion with a B. That's a massive cut. And now there's lawmakers in the House and Senate saying, hold up, that's going to hit Medicaid pretty hard. I don't want to hit Medicaid because, the constituents will lose their mind if they come back home and they realize they voted to cut Medicaid. That's not going to fly over very well for people. The thing is, you cannot always toe the GOP line, or even with the Democrats, you can't always toe the political line. What you're going to vote on is what impacts your people, what impacts your constituents. You should, otherwise you're not going to stay in office very long. So it's great nationally if we want to reduce the deficit, but everyone's going to be looking at their district and they're going to say, well, not in my district. There are about 76 million Americans on Medicaid. Now, this is 2023 data, but it's still huge. So slashing $880 billion without touching it? Good luck. Trump was just out there yesterday saying, we're not going to cut Medicaid. We're not going to touch Medicaid. We're just after the fraud. And then Johnson's over there nodding like, yeah, we're just after the fraud. But where are they going to find this money? Hardline conservatives in the House, like Scott Perry from Pennsylvania, they were aiming for $1.5 trillion, hoping to get $2 trillion in cuts. He stated, we wrote this bill for a reason. No stupid ideas. That means if the spending cuts are less than $1.5 trillion, they could be out. But there's more. Chip Roy, who helped muscle this thing through, says that his yes vote, it came with strings attached. He wants the final bill to gut all the energy subsidies from the Democratic 2022 Inflation Reduction Act. That's big climate and health law. Think EV credits, solar stuff. The problem is that some Republicans, they actually like that stuff. Look at Representative Buddy Carter from Georgia. He has a $7.5 billion EV and battery plant that created a lot of jobs. Last year, a bunch of GOP folks actually wrote Johnson begging him to keep parts of it there. So hardline conservatives, they want it dead. Moderates, they want to keep it. So what's at stake here? This isn't just about the budget. It's about Trump's entire domestic agenda. And you need the House and the Senate to see eye to eye. If they continue to look past each other, if they cannot reach a compromise or an agreement, that could spell trouble for the government in its entirety. You could be looking at a potential government shutdown come the middle of March. Hardliners want deficit neutral, but $4.7 trillion in tax cuts minus $2 trillion, it's still red ink. Right now, this is being viewed as a win. If you talk to anybody in Congress, they're looking at this and they're like, hey, yeah, we were able to agree. We were able to get this thing passed. We're going to make it happen. But there's a lot left unsaid, and there's a lot that needs to get done over the next couple of weeks. So will it actually pass through and the president will sign it and keep the government running and everything is fine? Or could this just be the beginning of the end and a government shutdown actually hits the federal workforce? And some federal employees, they wouldn't mind. Most people right now are going into the office 5 days a week. A government shutdown would have the federal workforce furloughed, meaning they would go back home and sit around until the government decided to reopen. And then, no matter how long they were not working, they would receive back pay. So let's say the government was shut down for a month, and that's not completely out of the realm of probability. It could happen. And if it were to shut down, well, that a lot of people look at that as a free vacation because they're getting that back pay. One way that a lot of politicians are looking at saving money in the government, talking about reducing the national deficit, is they're looking at continuing to chop away at the federal workforce by any means necessary, and that means reduction in force. It wasn't enough to have the hiring freeze. It wasn't enough to have the great probation purge. We're now in RIF territory, reduction in force. And this kicked off recently. OMB and OPM, they sent out a memo and they encouraged all federal agencies to start drafting up their plans, to start considering multiple areas in order to bring that number down, to shrink pretty much every single federal agency. If you want to know more about that, I want you to check this video out next. If you need a federal resume, check out the links down below. Thank you so much for watching. I'll see you in the next one.